Hi, my name is Patricia Souls, and today we're going to talk about multimedia. So this term, I have had the honor of taking a course called from Liberty University called Education 734, Implementation and Assessment of Multimedia Learning Tools. The professor was Dr. Abraham. So in this course, we went over the principles that actually go with training. This was completely different from what I'm used to. So I am actually from my military background means that my training revolves around the ADDIE process, which is analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. And so I'm not used to any of these principles. So this was a great course for me. I learned a lot in this course. And so we're going to go over a little of that today. And then I'm going to show you some of the work I'm working on it every day in my career. And we're going to take some of the information that Dr. Abraham gave us, and we're going to break it out into some course media, and we'll show you what good multimedia looks like and what some not so good multimedia can look like. So, all right, let's get into it so we can get to the fun stuff. All right, cognitive learning theory, learning principle. That was the first principle we learned. In this, we needed to learn what that meant. So cognitive learning principle actually means that there is only a certain amount of information that's going to get into the person's short-term memory. So we need to learn how we needed to learn how to actually help this person process the information that we're trying to teach them. So part of the cognitive learning principle is dual channel processing, where you don't just use your eyes. You try to use two different senses. So your eyes and your ears at the same time. So you have audio and you have text on screen or images. So we need to part of the cognitive learning principle also was that they really drove home with the required reading that you needed to only have in your training the essential learning information. You needed to make sure that you are emphasizing the essential learning. So for me, that means your action, conditions, and standards that the student needs to conduct the task that they have to complete by the end of the course. So that's what you need to focus on. You don't need to add that extra information in there, or they're going to get overloaded. Their processes are going to get overloaded. So you don't really want to show too much information. So right now, like on the screen, I really want you to focus on me and the cognitive learning principles. So I don't have a lot going on in this screen. I was going to actually throw up a crazy picture of something bright and a little more crazy than a lightning storm, but I still wanted to show you that that having extra information on the screen can be distracting. Here you're wondering, why I have the storm. Is it a brainstorm? Does it have anything to do with it whatsoever? Did she just she's lived in the South, and it's been Seattle around here lately where we've had rain every day. So what actually is the reason behind that? The reason was actually I wanted to point out to you that it can take away from the point of the training. So cognitive learning principle, that's what goes on with that. Contiguity principle, I am really horrible about saying that, but it is so important. Contiguity means that the information has to deal with one another. So your text deals with your with your images and things of that nature, and they're close together. You don't want them on different pages. So that's what the contiguity principle had to deal with. There's two different types that we talked about. Spatial, which is on-screen visuals, should correspond appropriately with the narration, and temporal, which is corresponding words and pictures are presented near each other. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to go into some of that here in a little bit at the end of this. So stay tuned. All right, the next principle we learned about was modality. So modality has a lot to do with the dual processing also. It has to do with that too much going on can overload the students, too much information hitting the eyes at one time. So how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with someone who's overwhelmed? You've got a large topic that a new learner of this information is trying to gain. They're trying to gobble every little piece of information that they can. So how do we help as ISDs? How do we help that person? So to do that, we should maybe try to hit both of their processing, their dual processing. So we should add visuals, and we should have audio at the same time. So that way they can process both at the same time, and both of it can hit their short-term memory. And hopefully more of the information will actually make it into their working memory. All right, so next is the redundancy principle. Now, I read something the other day, and it was talking about redundancy as in the military, they redundant will reteach you over and over and over the same thing. Well, they do that in kindergarten too, where they teach you at least 3 times. So that way you can get it. But that is not what this is talking about at all. So the redundancy principle is actually telling about if you have images and text on and you have text on screen, and you have some audio, that if you play the closed caption at the same time, that it can be too overwhelming and the person's going to miss part of it. So this is actually something that there's a little conflicting with that. So people that have that the language that is being spoken is not their first language, the redundancy principle doesn't necessarily work for them, and also people with disabilities. So with the redundancy principle, I find this one very funny to me, because I love to watch TV with closed caption on. My son started it when he was learning how to read, and he would turn on the closed caption, and he stopped it, but I still love to. I cannot process TV without having the closed caption on at the same time. My husband always calls it, he's like, can you not hear it? But I'm actually reading. So it's quite funny. But so there is some I have to question the redundancy principle. The book that we actually were reading was from 2006, and I feel like that humans, we adapt a lot to our environment, and I believe that our environment has made it so technology is here, so we're able to use it, and when we realize that something works for us, we'll start using it more and more. And I think that I have adapted, and other people have adapted to using closed caption since it's here. They have started using it in their normal day life, and so it's actually really so the redundancy principle doesn't really work for me. That was the main principles that we went over in the course. After this, I want to now I want to show you what I actually do for a living, and I want to show you how we can make training and break it out and use these principles. So here we go. All right. And I want to show you my references really quick because I may not remember at the end. So here you go. All right, those are the references that I will talk about today. All right, I3, that's the company I work for, and we make. I work in the virtual training simulations group, VTSG, and we make IMIs for the military. So this is one of the IMIs I'm making right now. And I'm just going to pick a product in here that is commercial off the shelf COTS. So you will have seen such things in the real world. So, all right, we got some text on our screen, we got some images, we actually have some 3D that we can fully move around, go to it. Now let's talk about this. Earlier, when we were talking about imagery, we said that we wanted it to pertain to it. I would definitely assume that this trailer has to do with these labels, right? We also want to make sure that our cognitive load isn't overwhelmed at this moment. Because of the training that I make, I use it for soldiers so they can use it on their own, or it can be used as a tool for the instructor. So for me, I don't want to overwhelm the instructor in the beginning. I don't want too much going on until he's ready for the student to engage if this is behind him. I don't want it flashing and doing crazy things and pulling away from him. So when we make this, we pull the labels so that they come out whenever you actually use each one. So you don't have all of them together. There is a list of information, but the students don't have any process too much at one time. Also, with this, something I learned a lot about that I really didn't think about was eye movement for a student, trying to keep them engaged in the information that's going on in the class. So let's say the student came here and was looking at it. They're going to look at maybe the title here first, and then they're going to look over here, and because they look like this in the beginning, remember? So they're going to either roll around, but their eyes are going to stay on one spot because they're actually moving the piece of equipment, but their eyes can stay in one spot. Then their eyes will probably drift over here to the left-hand side, and then they'll see it here. Now, one of the principles was talking about when you have labels, they should relate to one another. They should have a line, or it shouldn't be like 1, 2, 3 over here, and then you have 1, 2, 3 over here, and the person has to find the name. So this was our way of being able to make it so there was less information on the screen, that the student was able to focus on the information that they needed. So here we have a drop down. This is pertaining to the information that has to deal with the label. Because of where we talked about earlier with the eye movement, we put it with the information. So, they're not looking down here, or they're not looking somewhere else, or it's not on the next screen. This was, some of the stuff we learned this time. So we're going to go over some of these other pictures just to let you see what kind of stuff we're doing here. I'm going to go over 1 or 2 more, and then we're going to make our own slide in this IMI. So we got a grate, some belly boxes, spare tire. And obviously, if I was teaching my student right now, I would not go this fast because that's too much cognitive overload. Unless they already have information about this. And most of the time, this trailer information, what I'm teaching is new equipment training. And the new equipment training is for soldiers who already have experience with this. They've just got new equipment coming into the field. So they probably know about lift axles and rear jacks and rear tie-down provisions. All right, so now that we see what I'm working with my training with 3D, I want to show you some of the stuff we're doing with and how it'll work. All right, so we're going to I'm going to minimize this. Oh, that's not what I need. So I'm going to go back here and we're going to open up the PowerPoint that goes along with this, that corresponds with this training. So this was the HIMIT. That's not the right one. Let me find it. All right, so I got downloads and I go to my PowerPoint, presentation data, PowerPoint, and we're looking at the trailer. All right. So just to prove to you that this is the PowerPoint that we're actually using, on this first slide, I'm going to say, and I can't spell today. There it is. All right, Liberty University. I want to put that here. We're going to press save. I'm going to come over here to my little lesson. I'm going to escape out of it. And I'm going to bring down my command line and say lesson.refresh, press enter. It's telling me it's converting one PowerPoint slide, which is happens to be the one that we just did. Going to close that. We're going to go back to the trailer. And it now says Liberty University. Isn't that cool? Okay, that's just some of the neat stuff that we're working here at I3 that we've been able to do to put a PowerPoint into Unity. All right, so now I'm gonna open up, if I still have it open. That's not it. That's not it. Where did it go? Well, it's failing me now. All right, so I had a paragraph of information that I wanted to use, but I'm just going to pick another one. Last week we had a paper due, and this was my research that I found. So cognitive load theory states that unnecessary intellectual burden should be decreased to level adequate cognitive resources and authentic learning. Multiple studies provided for this theory and voiced. So anyway, all right, so we're going to grab this paragraph here and we're going to make this into actual training. So let's think about what we learned this week. And we're going to make, I'm just going to duplicate this slide, but we're going to change it around a little bit. So instead of labels, we're going to have some text on screen. Screen text. Okay. We're going to take that information that I just had here a second ago, and we're going to put a title of cognitive load theory. And of course, we want to use title case. All right. So we're going to save this. We're going to come back in our lesson. We're going to escape out. We're going to do lesson refresh again. Converting that PowerPoint. We're going to look at this slide that we just made, and we're going to talk about the different principles and what we should do to make this information so our student can grab it and put it into their short-term memory. Will that work? How did that? Maybe because I didn't save it. Save. Let's try again. It's because I had it on page 2. All right, so here we've got all this information. I like to call it like somebody vomited on the screen because they have so much on here. Let's talk about this for a second. So with cognitive load theory, is your student actually able to grab this information? Are they able to read it? Are they going to read 3 sentences, 4 sentences worth of information? Probably not. They're going to close down, and maybe they're going to look at this picture and they're going to be like, whatever. I don't know here. And I'm going to shut down. So let's talk about this from before we get into it. We start changing stuff. The book that we read said use animation as interpretive graphics. So animations can serve as interpretive functions when designed with special elements that reveal relationships not otherwise visible. So that's part of what we do here. Adding visual cueing to an animation. I would assume that, part of the labeling and stuff, that's what we do also. And the bottom line, animations can cost more to develop. 3D definitely costs more to develop than static diagrams. So it makes sense to use a series of static frames in your default graphic. I don't agree with that. I say I can either give you some training that's on this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, and so you actually learn how to use it before you touch it, or you can go out and touch it and you can break it. So, where do you want to spend your money? Do you want to spend your money replacing bent pins, or do you want to spend your money on your training and be able to use it for multiple people? All right, back to where we were talking about before. I shouldn't open that part up right there. I apologize for that. All right, so we got our paragraph here, and we got our title. Now we need to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to make this so our student isn't overloaded. What's our best possibility for this? So let's talk about the different principles and how we would use them. So right, let me go back, move this over here and look through the different ones. All right, so we talked about cognitive theory using dual channels. So we're going to have our lesson plan with this information, which is what I provided my instructor as part of my lesson. So they have the information here, or we're going to put it in here. So we're going to put so this is the new step. It's actually step 2, right? Because step 1 was the other one. So I'm just going to add 1 in here. I would actually have to move the other ones down. But okay, so we're going to do 2, and we're going to say cognitive theory, cognitive load theory. What was I doing? Oh, okay, sorry. Family came in. All right. So we got this information here. That, let me start these over before. We've got that blurb of text that we used earlier in that PowerPoint. This is what we're going to be using. So how do we break this up? Well, my first advice is, because we're going to be using dual channels, right? We're going to have our instructor speak, or with this, it's gonna hit two different ways. So we're not going to need all of this on the screen, because our instructor is actually going to say it. Because he's going to be there in person, we're not going to add can't find my mouse. I'm gonna move this over here real quick. I'm sorry. All right, so let me just grab it from back from here. I'm having some issues here. All right, so we said we're talking about cognitive load theory. This sentence. All right, so this is what we're using. All right, back to dual channels. So we have dual channels that we're going to use here. So we're going to hit them with images and text on screen, but we don't want to do too much so it doesn't overwhelm them, and we want to use some audio. So our instructor is going to be speaking. So to make sure our instructor knows what he needs to say, we put it into our lesson plan. So, all right, here we go. So we need to decide how we're going to do this, how we want to break this out. So our instructor knows this is word for word, in case he is a new instructor and he doesn't actually know this information. He can read this and be able to teach the student. More instructors that have had a longer time on the podium or have more information about the topic, they can deviate from the lesson plan. But the ISD wants to give the instructor as much information as they possibly can, so that way they can review beforehand. All right, so we've got this information here, but do we want it to look like that on the screen? No, we do not. So we're going to come back over to our lesson plan here, and we're going to make this into a couple or we're going to break it out, and then we're going to look at it again and see if there's something else that we could do. All right, so we said cognitive load theory, so we can make that kind of a bullet here, and we can say it's unnecessary because we can just have a reference page. We don't have to have that here. And we can say should be decrease the learning. So I like that. That's cool. Put a colon there, like we're actually talking about something. Multiple studies, voiced, principal, allowing students. So that just seems like more information about here. So our instructor can say that part. Study also highlighted the use of dual channel processing. So, so maybe we want to use dual channel processing also. And we want to give some more information about that. This case is use dual channel processing. All right. So I'm just making up some stuff here. All right, so we're going to save this. And we're going to open up our PowerPoint again. We'll escape out of it. And let them refresh. Let it convert. It's done. We're going to go to our second slide. And now we have some text on screen. So let's talk about that eye, the eye movement that we talked about earlier, about the congruency. So our student now is going to look up here, and they're looking at an image that's in the middle, and then they go down. So they're not having to look everywhere around. So this can work. I would want to, if we were actually talking about something such as a platform or something, we actually get a little closer. But because we're actually talking about the cognitive load theory, we might have an image here that actually pertains to it. But but because this was an example, this is what I have to show you. So let's see, is there anything else that I wanted to show you with this? Oh, I've been sharing. So we talked about this, and is this the best case scenarios? Should we be using images? And we'll go back to information, such as here. So here we have two different ones. It's talking about the bot generator and the launcher generator. They're two different ones. This seems logical. Here, where you have text on screen and you have images, you make sure that the images pertain to it. Do we want to maybe move it so it goes in more for the landing legs? So another thing with best practices, soldiers they don't want them walking under here. So you don't necessarily want to put them under there. So anyway, all right, this is slide 6 now. So we're gonna do camera dot shift, and we're going to move me out of the way, and we're going to do copy pivot to open up our PowerPoint presentation. This was slide 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so we're going to actually change it to here. And we're going to say save. Escape out of here. Okay, now we're going back to our trailer. I'm going to move me out of the way. Close my tool. Go back to slide 6. Yeah. Oh, look, this is actually closer. So would this actually help the student be able to only look at the information that pertains to them? So we're taking the focus off maybe the top of it or the rear and focusing on the landing legs, which is the title. So this helps the student learn. It helps with the principles, with the modality principle, and it helps with the cognitive load theory, because our instructor is able to actually talk more about this. It's in the lesson plan, and but we have pertinent information that is part of their task on the screen. So this is what I wanted to point out to you today. Controls. So let's see, was there, let's go back over what we learned in our course again, just to wrap up. So in this, I just wanted to make sure that that teachers could see the design presentation and some of the takeaways that I learned in this class. And our instructor also asked us to add information about where we feel like this is going. So XR, extended reality, it is a favorite of mine. You have virtual reality and you have augmented reality, and those two are definitely areas where I feel like multimedia is going, where you're able to incorporate not just video games, but training into these extended realities, and you're able to immerse a student into that environment so they could feel like they're actually out in the field. You know, you could have their hearing on so they could hear things blasting in the background, or like we have one that's on a ship, you can have the ship waves. I feel like a lot of training will be going that way. I am not as big a fan of virtual reality as I am augmented reality, because I am a klutz. I have a tendency to trip over my own feet even when my vision is not taken away from me. So virtual reality is not a friend of mine if I'm having to stand up. So now augmented reality, I feel like there's so many more uses for it. I can stick my soldiers in the side of a big bay and let them bring up an iPad. They don't even have to have different, they don't have to have the goggles or anything like that. They can just have an iPad and they can pull it up and they can have it look like this trailer is right there in front of them, and they can walk around it or they can look underneath it. And so the augmented reality is the way I feel like multimedia is going. It's going to be a really big game changer whenever it starts really taking off. I really think so. So I just want to, I don't know what my time is on here, and we were supposed to have 30 minutes. So if there's more to this, I'm going to add more afterwards, but I'm going to go back over the principles one more time, and then I'm going to let you go. So I want to thank you for your time. So let me pull back up that PowerPoint. So again, this is the information that we went over in this course. We went over the cognitive learning principle, which is where we have there's only so much that a person can cognitively grasp at a certain amount of time. There's too much going on. So we gotta limit what's going on around them. You know, take out the extra noise, take out that waves. You know, nobody needs to hear the waves. Now, if you had a commander yelling at you information or something that pertains to their job, I could totally see that. But just waves splashing, I don't know if that's needed. All right. Next, we had contiguity. Contiguity was saying that we wanted our images close to our information. We don't want them on separate screens. So we don't want to, on the next slide, where we're talking about those trailer jacks, we don't want to have that the instructor talk about all that information and be pointing down here at axles instead of pointing down here at the jacks. That's what the contiguity principle has to deal with. The modality has to deal with dual principles. Hit them on both senses. Audio, visual, or their eyes and their ears at the same time, so they can cognitively process more at one time. Redundancy principle. As I mentioned, this is not like the military. This is not, we're going to teach you 3 times. This is, a student may be distracted if you have closed caption at the same time as when you're showing them an image or a video. So they recommend that you limit that closed caption and only give them the option to use closed caption when they need it. And this, my friends, is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you for coming and listening to me today. These are my references that I went over, or that were part of everything that I learned. And this was actually a really great course, and I hope that I'm able to have more courses with Dr. Abraham. So this is Patricia Souls signing off. Thank you again for watching.